Welcome to the programme. We start with a developing and breaking story. An Indonesian transport official says they've lost contact with a passenger plane. It is an AirAsia flight. It's flight number QZ8501. That's an Airbus 320-200. It was travelling from Surabaya in Indonesia to Singapore. The plane lost contact with ground control while flying over the Java Sea. There are reportedly 162 people on board the plane, and most of the passengers are Indonesians. The journey is a popular route for Indonesians travelling to Singapore for their holidays. Well, the other information we know at this moment. Firstly, Singapore Civil Aviation Authority has said in a statement that flight QZ8501 lost communication with Jakarta's air traffic control at 7:24 a.m. Singapore time. That's about an hour before it was scheduled to land in Singapore. The contact was lost about 42 minutes after the jetliner took off from Indonesia's Surabaya airport. The plane had 7 crew and 155 passengers, including 16 children and 1 infant. That information coming from AirAsia in a statement that they put out a short time ago. There were 5 foreigners on board, 3 South Koreans, including that infant, and 1 each from Singapore and Malaysia. The rest of the passengers, as I say, were Indonesians. The plane lost contact when it was believed to be over the Java Sea between Kalimantan and Java Islands. The weather in the area was apparently cloudy. Search and rescue operations have been activated by the Indonesian authorities, and the Singapore Air Force and the Navy are searching with 2 C-130 planes. Now, Flight Radar 24, that's a flight tracking website, has said the plane was delivered in September 2008. That would make it 6 years old. It said the plane was flying at 32,000 feet when the signal from the plane was lost. The Malaysia-based AirAsia, which has dominated cheap travel in the region for years, has never lost a plane before. Well, in the past half hour, an Indonesian official is reporting that the flight had requested to move to a higher altitude to avoid clouds. That's a live shot picture from Singapore Airport. Let's talk to the BBC's Karishma Vaswani, who joins us now from our bureau in Singapore. Karishma, what more details are you hearing from your end?
Well, just to recap, James, the airplane lost contact with Indonesian air traffic authorities about an hour into its flight. It left very early this morning from the Indonesian city of Surabaya. That's the second largest city in Indonesia. As you were saying, it's one of the most popular destinations for Indonesians going abroad on their holidays. We're heading into the New Year period. Many people must have been or probably taking off to head to Singapore for a few days off. The majority of people on board were Indonesians, and as of yet there are no details on many of the other nationalities, but we do know that the majority of the people on board were Indonesians. About an hour into the flight, it appears that the plane lost contact with air traffic control in Jakarta. Some Indonesian airport officials, transport officials, have been saying that it requested a different route, an alternative route. Other officials have also been quoted as saying that the reason for that is that there was challenging weather. Those were the words that they used in the area, but still very few details emerging from what is an ongoing and developing story. And
just tell us a bit more about AirAsia. I mentioned how popular as an airline it's been for people wanting cheap flights. Does it travel all over this region?
It certainly does, James. It is one of the most affordable and well-connected airlines in the region. And for many people looking to get on a budget flight at this time of year, it is a very affordable option. It has never lost a plane, as you said earlier in the introduction. It is a Malaysian-based airline, although it has headquarters in other parts of the region as well. There is an Indonesia AirAsia office, in fact, and it has done brisk business between the ports of Surabaya and Singapore, including Jakarta and Singapore, and travels around the region.
Just tell us a little bit more about the Singaporean involvement in this search and rescue. I mentioned at the beginning that they were helping out. What more do we know about that?
Well, the Singaporean side has committed to helping in any way that it can. We've seen some comments coming out from the Prime Minister as well that the country is happy to assist in any way that it can with this ongoing story. And I imagine that both countries and transport officials on both sides are working very closely together to find out what happened to this airline.
Karishma, many thanks for the moment. Karishma Vaswani there, our correspondent in Singapore. We're just showing you now a news conference. Although it says Singapore on the screen, I think it's Surabaya in Indonesia, which is where this plane took off from. I'm afraid there's no English translation, but that news conference just giving more details, of course, about what might have happened. Those details will filter through, and of course we'll pass them on to you as soon as we get them. But that news conference in Surabaya in Indonesia, where flight QZ8501 took off from a few hours ago. Well, the head of AirAsia is Tony Fernandez, and he put out this somber tweet a short time ago. He says, "Thank you for all your thoughts and prayers. We must stay strong." That's Tony Fernandez, the owner and chief executive of AirAsia. They've also set up an emergency call centre for anyone who's concerned about what may have happened to this flight. If you've got relatives on the flight, let me just tell you what the number is. It's 62, the code 212-985-0801. That's the emergency number, which is on your screen too, if you're worried about anyone you know on that flight. Well, let's go to outside Changi International Airport in Singapore. We can talk to the BBC producer, Pamela Coe, who's just outside the airport. Pamela, are there many relatives and friends gathered at the airport?
Yep, there have been groups of relatives and concerned friends of passengers on the airport just streaming into this holding area right behind me. It's a secure area, so media can't really enter, but they do look very worried, and they're slowly trickling in at the moment.
Yes, I'm sure they are very worried. Are the airport authorities giving out any more information? What have you been hearing?
Well, besides the statement that Tony Fernandez, AirAsia CEO, is about to put out shortly, the authorities in Singapore, civil aviation authorities, they will be holding a press conference in a few minutes. They haven't really given us a time yet, but we're just kind of waiting around to hear more about any new information that they've discovered. There are unconfirmed reports of an aircraft that has been reportedly crashed east of Bateling Island. An airplane wreckage has been found, but there is no confirmation that this is the AirAsia flight. An Air Force spokesman have also confirmed using last point of contact to conduct an air search of where the last had contact with the plane. So that's as far as we've known.
Pamela, just recap what you said there in case people missed it, that some wreckage of a plane has been found, but it's not confirmed that this is the missing plane. Just tell us what you're hearing again.
So there have just been rumors of an airplane wreckage having been found off the east coast of the Indonesian islands of Bateling. It's just been there's just some rumors that we don't know yet, but that's just what we've heard.
Okay, Pamela, we'll wait to find out what more we hear about that. That was Pamela Coe outside Changi Airport in Singapore. We can also talk to Captain Desmond Ross now, who's a former pilot and aviation security expert. Welcome to the programme. Just tell us a little bit more about the procedure in cases like this. Presumably there is constant contact between the airplane and the various air traffic controls around the region. What happens when that contact is lost?
Afternoon, Jeremy. Yes, the contact is there. There will be radio recordings, tapes of everything that is said between air traffic control and the pilots. The aircraft would have disappeared from the secondary surveillance radar system at the time. That area is quite well covered by radar, and I think they will have a full radar track that they can play back to examine the flight path. They will know precisely where it disappeared, and they will commence the search from that point. There will have been attempts to call the aircraft on radio from various locations to try and establish any form of contact with him. If that failed, they will then start to send out search aircraft and boats. They will be looking in that immediate area, and a search will expand around the last known fix of the aircraft. with luck, they should find something very, very quickly. It's interesting, I heard your previous speaker mention that they're hearing rumors of some aircraft wreckage having been found. Possible, I suppose, but we really don't know what has happened here. I don't see anything unusual in the fact that he asked for a change of route during the flight. That's quite normal. If the weather is bad, you would try to climb to give the passengers a smoother ride, or descend, or turn left or right of the track if there is bad air, a thunderstorm, anything of that nature ahead of you.
But just to reiterate what you said, the authorities should be able to pinpoint quite clearly if this aircraft has gone down, where it might have gone down, because of those constant updates. Presumably, it's a mixture of the pilots talking up to a certain point, but automated as well?
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, MH370 is still very fresh in all of our minds, and I've been doing a lot of work on that one. That also disappeared from a radar screen, and we still haven't found it. This aircraft has disappeared from a radar screen in a very similar fashion. It has simply disappeared. It's not there any longer. But there is no, we have heard nothing about a mayday call or any form of communication from the aircraft to the air traffic controller to say that he had a problem. So we don't know at this moment what has happened. The aircraft has simply disappeared in much the same way that MH370 disappeared. But beyond that, everything else is speculation at this moment. The search will commence from that point where it was last seen on the radar screen. So it'll be an expanding search. They will look there, and then they will start to work a search at around that same location.
Are you able to tell us anything about the challenges of flying around this region, particularly at this time of the year? Can weather be a problem?
Weather can be a problem. You start to get monsoonal activity and heavy buildups of cloud. You can get thunderstorms that will extend up as high as 65,000 feet, way above the flight path of any normal airliner. But that would mean then that he wouldn't try to climb over it. He would normally go around it, and they would request a diversion left or right of track to avoid the weather. The aircraft is equipped with weather radar, so they can see very clearly where the areas of heavy turbulence or heavy storms are located. They can see that well ahead before they actually reach the area of turbulence or bad weather, so they can plan their track to avoid that weather. And similarly, the air traffic controllers have got weather information, and they will, as far as possible, accommodate all the airliners in the area to avoid bad weather. Look, modern aircraft, you'd be amazed at the amount of turbulence they can live with. They are tested to destruction at the factories before they are ever put into service. So a bit of a storm should not really be a major problem. Aircraft penetrate storms all the time. Generally, the pilots try to avoid them simply for the comfort of the passengers. But the aircraft are designed to withstand a lot of pressure and a lot of turbulence without any ill effects whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah, and as you mentioned, the fact that the pilot requested a change of course is part and parcel of flying these passenger planes.
It is. It is.
Carry on.
We don't know whether he's got some other sort of a difficulty that has occurred simultaneously or due to the weather, and that will come out.
Captain Ross, thank you very much for joining us. That was Captain Desmond Ross, a former pilot himself and an aviation security expert. Let's recap how this incident began for you. The plane was an Airbus A320 with 2 pilots, 4 flight attendants and 1 engineer on board. It was scheduled to take off at 5:20 in the morning local time. It was delayed by 15 minutes. Just under an hour later, it lost contact with air traffic control while flying apparently over the Java Sea. It was due to arrive in Singapore at 8:30 in the morning, Singapore time, which is an hour ahead of Indonesia. With me in the studio is our news reporter, Ben Bland. Ben, just recap any more details that we have at this stage. At least 160 people on board.
Yes, 155 of those, it's been confirmed, are passengers, most of them Indonesian nationals, but there have been some reports of 1 Briton among the passengers, 3 Koreans, 1 Singaporean and 1 Malaysian also on board. That's being reported by one of the news agencies, Reuters, I think quoting local media in Indonesia. And as you mentioned, 6 or 7 crew members, bringing the total to around 160. The facts that have been confirmed so far, the flight number QZ8501, that it took off from Surabaya en route to Singapore. 42 minutes into the flight, it lost contact with air traffic control. An Indonesian official from the Transport Ministry said that before losing contact, the plane had asked if it could climb to a higher altitude to avoid clouds. But beyond that, there has not been a huge amount of detail. Of course, we are waiting for that, but I mean, our wait for facts and information and detail, you know, it's nothing compared to the families and the friends who are now gathering, presumably at Singapore airport, where they were expecting to, many hours ago, have greeted their relatives and friends on board that flight. At the moment, completely uncertain as to where they are, where that whole flight is.
Yeah, so many people no doubt travelling for the holiday period, and those families waiting to see their relatives. No Mayday call at all. There was no emergency or distress call, as far as we know, that was issued. It's simply lost contact.
Well, as far as we know, they haven't said that there was any Mayday or distress signal made by the flight. All that they have confirmed, this has been confirmed by the Indonesian authorities, that at 23:17 GMT, contact was lost with the flight. Just to tell you that AirAsia is a big budget operator. It's one of the biggest airlines in the region. People in that part of the world very familiar with this. It's owned by the international businessman Tony Fernandez. It's seen as a successful business, and you know, this it's not happened to them before. They have not lost a flight like this before, but of course, there are lots of questions at the moment. We know that a search and rescue operation has begun. The Singaporean Civil Aviation Authority says it is involved. The Singaporean Air Force and Navy also involved in that search. And as you say, at this time of year, especially when people are travelling to be with family and friends, an unimaginably anxious wait for information for all those who know people among those 155 passengers and indeed the 7 crew members on board that flight.
Ben, many thanks for the moment. I'm sure we'll be back with you for more updates a little later. That was Ben Bland, our news reporter there.